This is my 900-mile review of the Topo shoe. It is an incredibly thorough review. I think that on YouTube, often when I look up reviews of shoes, I'm seeing influencers who have just gotten the shoes really new. They've just gone out and used them once or twice, and they haven't really lived with them. And on my Pacific Crest Trail through hike from Kennedy Meadows until essentially Ashland, Oregon, so the entirety of the northern section of California, and the Sierras, I've used these shoes. And so I've gotten to know the good and the bad and the things that annoy me. The way that we're going to do this review is I'm going to start with the bottom with the tread, and then I'm going to work up through the cushioning, and then I'm going to talk about the top mesh and the sort of rubber that's on the front. Then we'll talk about the construction as a whole. And I'll finish talking to you about the walking experience in the shoe. So to start, the tread. The tread is as good as most shoes, but not as good as the La Sportiva. I'm not really sure what about tread makes it sticky or have friction, but the best way that I can describe it is that it just didn't feel as sticky as the La Sportiva. Almost felt like the La Sportiva's rubber was had more give to it, which allowed it to just stick onto the rock really intensely. Whereas this, even though it still seems to have the same kind of friction, you're able to push off without slipping more than the La Sportiva. When I put my foot down, I didn't feel like I stuck like something like the La Sportiva. Another thing with the traction is that after about 500 miles, the tread itself, this black part on the bottom, just starts to come off. And this is 400 miles and or 400 miles past 500 miles. It's 900 miles. And I had to crazy glue, and I think crazy glue is probably better than super glue, but I'm not sure. I haven't used both. Just make sure that at 500 miles, if you want to push it past that mark, that you don't use too much glue. Just use enough to keep the tread attached to the shoe. Moving on to the cushioning. So they use two different kinds of cushions on the shoe. You can see there's the black part and there's the white part. And then you have some of the black part that comes around the top as well. And what that does is it's using that soft cushion that's bouncy that I didn't like in the Ultras and the Hokas, because often what happens is that it causes your arch to collapse, and you get a little bit of that in this shoe. But the harder rubber, which makes it feel a little bit more brutal, but a little bit more stable, balances out that softer cushioning and gives you the feeling like you're just more balanced on rocks. That's also, I think the harder cushioning is what's allowed the shoe to last until 900 miles. Although after 500 or 600 miles, it definitely starts to feel like the cushioning is dead. And if you're just buying these to use at home and maybe go on a hike on the weekend, the cushion has the capacity to re-expand if you just let it rest for a little while. On through hiking every day, we're compressing that cushion, and so it gets compressed quicker than if you were just using this shoe over the weekend. Okay, moving on to the upper construction. So 5 years ago, when I was doing, or in 21, so 4 years ago, when I was doing the Pacific Crest Trail the first time, the Ultras were having a major issue with this rubber on the front coming off. And I noticed even in the shoes that I was wearing, the Hokas, this rubber was coming off or got ripped through. Nowadays, the Ultras, this rubber stays on, and the Topos. So I think that there's been an advancement in this rubber because, as you can see, after 900 miles, it's still totally attached and has really protected the fabric part of the upper. And 4 years ago on the PCT, pretty much everyone's fabric, the textile of the upper, would get ripped after 600 miles. They just keep hiking and get rocks in their shoes. But this textile has stayed really strong for 900 miles, is just starting to break up in my other shoe. And so I think they've probably also had advancements in the fabric of the upper. Now moving to the tongue. The tongue can be an issue for a lot of shoes. With the La Sportiva, the tongue slides down, but with the Topo shoes, they have this ingenious sort of elegant invention where they have two pieces of string that you can bring the laces through. It's different than just that like little hole that old shoes have, that sort of little cutout. This really keeps the shoelace exactly where you want it. Also, the Topo shoe gives you what seems like extra long shoelaces, which is really nice. I just tuck them in once I tie it. The shoelaces also stay snug the entire day. This is different than the La Sportivas as well, because the La Sportiva shoelaces will come undone or come loose every 6 to 7 miles. So the tongue can be a major issue with a lot of shoes, both with like the Prodigios with the La Sportiva. The tongue really dug into your foot, and this tongue is very comfortable. The shoe itself is really breathable. It hasn't felt like it's caused my foot to be hotter than any other shoe, although it doesn't feel cooler than any other shoes. I think it's just normal but correct. One of the nice things is because there's such a big standover height and you have that rubber, you can walk through mud and not be afraid that water is going to get in. So that's nice. Another thing that La Sportiva has done is they've really developed the insole. The insole is supposed to be hydrophobic, and I've noticed that it does shed water better than a lot of other shoes that I've used. And it's really nice to see a shoe company spending a little bit extra time and money on their insoles, because when you take the insoles out of the Hokas, or some of the other shoes, it just seems like they put the insole in as an afterthought. And this insole is really adding a lot of cushioning, and it hasn't broken down over time. And they even put in that new technology for it being hydrophobic. So that's cool. And so now moving on to the construction of the shoe. One of the ways that you can tell that a shoe has not been constructed well is if it squeaks at any time throughout the life of the shoe. And this shoe is quiet. It doesn't make a lot of sound. Another way that you can tell that the construction is bad is this front lip. In badly constructed shoes, those are the first things to come off, and you usually need to use shoe glue or something to reattach them. With this, it stayed on the entire time, so you can really tell whatever companies manufacturing these shoes for Topo are using really strong glue, which is making the shoe super reliable and last for a really long time. So to end with the way that this shoe rides, how it feels to actually walk in the shoe. And this is where my major negative is. And I don't know if it's just sort of my obsessive compulsiveness or something, but I don't like the way that the shoe feels as I'm walking in it. Um, it feels like first you're putting your heel down and then you're pushing off with the front of your foot. The best way that I can describe it is it feels like there's two parts to your movement through space. So it's here and then it's there. And it sort of gives me, I don't know, I just don't like the way it feels. And that's a major problem. That's a reason to not get a shoe, is if you don't like the way that it feels when you're walking in it. When you first get the shoe, it's going to feel tight and it'll take about 40 miles for it to loosen up, and then you start to get the feeling that I'm talking about. And that's really the best way that I can describe it, is it feels like two motions. Unlike the La Sportivas Bashudo, that feels really stable and the heel feels really planted. This This is not as bad as the Hoka, where it feels like there's sort of a banana push off, like there's sort of a banana shape and you're sort of rolling over the shoe. With this one, it's heel down and then push off. That's the only way that I can describe it. I'd like to do it better. And so for this shoe, in my made up rating scale, I would give it an 8. I would also give the La Sportiva Bushudo, which formerly was my favorite shoe. I'd also give that an 8. I think that the trail conditions will dictate whether you want to get a Topo shoe or a La Sportiva Bushudo. The Bushudo, if you're doing the Pacific Crest Trail, would be the shoe that I would want in the Sierras or any high alpine. And this shoe would be for all the other walking on the Pacific Crest Trail. When you really want that balance and you want that stick, you're going to want the La Sportiva. But just a general workhorse, this is a great workhorse. Any shoe that can make it to 900 miles has been incredibly constructed. And there really isn't any problem that you can come up with that's glaring in this shoe. So that's my video on the Topo. Thanks for watching.